This story is titled, My Friend's Closest Friend Planned to Tear Us Apart, and My Friend Took Her Side Instead of Mine. But when the truth emerged, they both broke down and pleaded for forgiveness. Hey Reddit, my name is Tyler, and I'm 29 years old. I work as an electrical project supervisor for a mid-sized construction company here in Tampa, Florida. The job pays decent money. I'm not rich by any means, but I'm comfortable enough to live well without constantly worrying about bills. I've been married to my wife Jessica for 4 years now, though we've been together for 6 years total. We actually met through mutual friends at a college party back when she was studying marketing, and I was working on my business management degree. Jessica is honestly great. She's smart, hardworking, and we've always made a good team. We split everything 50-50, from household expenses to chores, and we've been steadily saving up to buy our first house together. We've even talked seriously about starting a family once we get settled into homeownership. Both of us are pretty laid-back people who don't need fancy, expensive things to be happy. We drive reliable cars, live in a decent apartment, and our biggest annual splurge is probably our camping trip to the Smoky Mountains every summer. But this story isn't really about Jessica, even though she plays a major role in what happened. This story is about her younger sister Brianna, who is 24 years old and without a doubt the most toxic, entitled, gold-digging person I've ever had the misfortune of knowing. I'm not exaggerating when I say that this woman has completely destroyed my life, and I want to tell you exactly how she did it. Let me paint you a detailed picture of who Brianna really is as a person. This woman has never held down a real job in her entire adult life, and I mean never. She's worked at a few different retail stores and restaurants over the years, but she always gets fired within just a few weeks. Whether it's showing up late constantly, getting into arguments with customers, or just not showing up to work at all, she can't seem to maintain employment anywhere. Her longest employment streak was 5 weeks at a Dunkin' Donuts, and that only lasted as long as it did because the manager had a crush on her and kept giving her second chances. Instead of working like a normal human being and contributing to society, Brianna spends her days crafting the perfect Instagram posts for her maybe 900 followers, half of whom are probably bots, and endlessly swiping through dating apps looking for her Prince Charming. By Prince Charming, I mean any guy making 6 figures who's dumb enough to fall for her manipulative act. This girl literally has entrepreneur and influencer written in her Instagram bio, which is absolutely laughable when you consider what her actual business consists of. She sells overpriced face masks from some MLM pyramid scheme, and in all the time I've known her, I've never seen her make a single sale. But she posts about building her empire constantly, talking about her success and her bright future. It's honestly pathetic to watch. Brianna still lives with their parents at 24 years old, completely rent-free obviously. She drives a 2018 Honda Civic that Daddy bought her for her birthday, but she constantly tells people it's just temporary until she gets her dream car. Apparently, that dream car is a white Mercedes because that's what all the Instagram influencers drive, and she's convinced that's her destiny. Her entire wardrobe consists of fake designer items that are so obviously knockoffs it's embarrassing. I'm talking about Coach bags that probably cost $35 on Wish and are missing half the hardware, Louis Vuitton shoes that are missing half the letters in the logo, and Michael Kors purses from outlet malls that she pretends she bought at full retail price. She posts photos of this cheap junk on social media with captions like "blessed" and "living my best life," acting like she's some kind of socialite instead of an unemployed mooch living off her parents' generosity. The delusion is absolutely incredible to witness. What makes it even worse is how she talks about these items like they're genuine luxury pieces, describing her shopping trips and her investment pieces, as if anyone who knows anything about fashion can't immediately tell everything she owns is fake. The family dynamic in Jessica's household is completely messed up, and it's been that way for years. Brianna is clearly the golden child who can do absolutely no wrong in their parents' eyes, while Jessica has always been cast as the responsible one who's expected to clean up everyone's messes and never complain about it. During family dinners, Brianna dominates every single conversation without fail. If Jessica starts talking about something interesting, her work projects, a promotion she's working toward, or really anything meaningful, Brianna will literally interrupt her mid-sentence to talk about some random guy she met on Tinder, or to complain about how difficult it is to be an influencer in today's competitive market. Their mother always takes Brianna's side in these interactions too, which makes it even more frustrating to watch. When Brianna makes snide, passive-aggressive comments about Jessica's clothes being too corporate or her lifestyle being boring, their mom will actually laugh and say things like, "Oh, you know, Brianna, she's just being honest," or "She has such great fashion sense, maybe you should listen to her advice." I've watched Jessica's face during these moments countless times, and there's always this quick flash of hurt that crosses her expression. But she never fights back or defends herself. She just takes it silently because that's what she's been trained to do her entire life. It's honestly heartbreaking to see how normalized this toxic dynamic has become in their family. The first major red flag about Brianna's true character should have been at Jessica's birthday dinner about 3 years ago. We had gone to this nice steakhouse to celebrate. Nothing crazy expensive, but definitely not a cheap family restaurant either. The whole family was there to celebrate Jessica's recent promotion at work, which was a big deal because she'd been working toward it for over a year. Instead of congratulating her sister or even acknowledging the reason we were all there, Brianna spent the entire dinner complaining loudly about how the restaurant was too dark for her to take good Instagram photos. She kept asking our poor waiter if he knew any single doctors or lawyers in the area, completely embarrassing everyone at the table. She was treating him like some kind of personal matchmaking service instead of someone who was just trying to do his job. When the bill finally came at the end of the night, Brianna just sat there scrolling through her phone while everyone else reached for their wallets to split the cost. Her dad ended up paying for her $75 meal without even blinking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jessica told me later that this was completely normal behavior. Brianna never pays for anything because she claims she doesn't have money right now. But somehow she always has cash available for new makeup, fake nails, and whatever trendy accessories she thinks will help her image. The first time I actually met Brianna was at a family barbecue, and I knew immediately that she was going to be trouble. Jessica had already told her family that I worked as a project supervisor in electrical construction, but apparently Brianna heard the word construction and immediately started making assumptions about my financial situation. She either thought I was completely broke or secretly loaded. There was no middle ground in her mind. Her very first question to me wasn't, "Nice to meet you," or anything a normal, socially adjusted person would say when meeting their sister's boyfriend for the first time. Instead, she straight up asked, "So like, what kind of electrical work do you do? Houses or like bigger stuff?" When I explained that I supervise commercial projects like office buildings and retail spaces, I could literally see the wheels turning in her head as she processed this information. "Oh, so you must work with a lot of contractors and suppliers," she said, leaning in way too close to me and invading my personal space. "That must be really good money, right? Like 6 figures?" Jessica looked absolutely mortified by her sister's inappropriate line of questioning, but she didn't say anything to stop it or redirect the conversation. I just gave a vague, non-committal answer about it being decent work that paid the bills, but Brianna wasn't satisfied with that response. She kept pushing throughout the entire barbecue, asking increasingly invasive questions about my truck, my apartment, whether I had savings, and if Jessica and I were planning to buy a house soon. It felt like being interrogated by the world's most obvious and amateur gold digger. Every question was designed to figure out exactly how much money I made and what kind of assets I had. The worst part was how she talked about her own so-called career during this conversation. She spent at least 20 minutes telling me about her MLM business and how she was going to be financially free within 3 years through her entrepreneurial ventures. She showed me her Instagram account on her phone and talked endlessly about all her supposed brand partnerships and collaborations with other influencers. I looked at her profile later that night out of curiosity, and she had maybe 2 posts promoting random garbage products with like 12 likes each. The disconnect between her grandiose claims and the reality of her non-existent following was staggering. "I only date guys who understand entrepreneurship," she said, while giving me this weird, inappropriately flirty look that made my skin crawl. Most guys are intimidated by successful women like me. I almost choked on my burger when she said that. This unemployed 22-year-old woman who was living with her parents rent-free and had never held down a job for longer than 5 weeks actually thought she was too successful and accomplished for most men. The level of delusion was absolutely incredible to witness firsthand. She genuinely believed her own hype about being this successful entrepreneur, despite having 0 evidence of any actual business success or financial independence. For the next couple of years, I only saw Brianna at major holidays and family events, which was perfectly fine with me. I had no desire to spend any more time around her than absolutely necessary. But during these family gatherings, I started noticing some really weird and concerning patterns in her behavior toward me. She would always find excuses to sit near me at dinner tables, even if it meant awkwardly rearranging the seating arrangements that had already been established. She would ask Jessica about my work schedule and when I would be attending upcoming family events, like she was keeping track of my availability. During group photos, she would somehow always manage to end up standing right next to me, often positioning herself between Jessica and me or finding ways to get closer than was appropriate. Her comments during these interactions were subtle, but definitely inappropriate and made me increasingly uncomfortable. She would say things like, "Jessica's so lucky to have found a guy with such a stable job," while staring directly at me instead of looking at Jessica. Or she'd make comments like, "I wish I could find a man who works as hard as you do," with this lingering eye contact that lasted way too long and felt completely inappropriate. Jessica either didn't notice these interactions or chose to ignore them completely. Whenever I brought up Brianna's weird and increasingly inappropriate behavior, Jessica would just dismiss my concerns and say I was overthinking things or reading too much into innocent interactions. "That's just how Brianna is," she would say. "She's friendly with everyone because she doesn't have many close friends." And honestly, it wasn't hard to understand why she didn't have friends. Who wants to hang around someone that toxic and self-absorbed? Last spring, I got promoted to Senior Electrical Project Supervisor, which came with a pretty significant raise that Jessica and I were absolutely thrilled about. This promotion meant we could finally start seriously looking at houses in our price range and begin making concrete plans for our future together. To celebrate this career milestone, we decided to upgrade my old Ford F-150 to a brand new 2024 Chevy Colorado. It wasn't anything too flashy or over the top, but it was definitely nicer and more reliable than what I'd been driving for the past several years. The first family gathering after my promotion was Jessica's mom's birthday dinner, and that's when things with Brianna really started to escalate in a disturbing way. Brianna showed up wearing what I can only describe as a ridiculous outfit. Basically, a dress that was pretending to be a shirt, way too short and way too tight for a family dinner. The moment she spotted my new truck in the driveway, she immediately zeroed in on it like a heat-seeking missile. "Oh my God, is this yours?" she squealed with this over-the-top excitement that seemed completely fake and performative. She started running her hands along the hood of my truck like she was caressing a lover, which was incredibly weird and inappropriate to watch. "This must have cost like $55,000, she said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. It didn't actually cost anywhere near that much, but I just gave her a simple response about it being a work upgrade that I'd needed for a while. That was a big mistake on my part because it gave her the perfect opening to start asking about my promotion in detail. She wanted to know exactly how much my raise was, whether I got stock options or other benefits, and if Jessica and I were looking at buying a house soon with our increased income. She was like a bloodhound sniffing out money, asking increasingly specific financial questions that would have been inappropriate coming from a close family member, let alone someone I barely tolerated. "You know," she said while posing for selfies with my truck in the background, "successful men like you deserve someone who really understands ambition and what it takes to build something meaningful." Then, she delivered the line that should have been a massive wake-up call. "Not everyone can handle dating someone with real money, you know." She said this loudly enough for Jessica to hear from where she was standing just a few feet away. I saw Jessica's face tighten with obvious discomfort and hurt. But instead of telling her sister to back off or defending our relationship, Jessica just quickly changed the subject to something else entirely. That should have been another huge red flag for me. Jessica was already making excuses for Brianna's completely inappropriate behavior and refusing to address it directly. After that birthday dinner, Brianna's social media stalking went into complete overdrive. She started following me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and even TikTok, which I barely use and only have a few posts on. Every single time I would decline her follow requests, she would send brand new ones within just a few days, like she was keeping track of when I'd rejected her previous attempts. My LinkedIn profile views went through the roof because she was clearly checking it constantly, probably multiple times per day. Then she escalated her behavior by actually showing up at my work site, which crossed a line from inappropriate to genuinely concerning. The first time this happened, she claimed she was just driving by and happened to see my truck parked there. This was obviously complete bullshit because my current project at the time was a new office complex about 35 minutes away from anywhere she would have any legitimate business being. It's not like she was job hunting in industrial areas or had any reason to be driving around construction sites. "I brought you coffee," she said, holding up a Starbucks cup like it was some kind of grand romantic gesture. "I thought you might need some energy for all that hard work you do." She was wearing this low-cut top and kept deliberately leaning over my truck's tailgate while we talked, making sure I had a clear view down her shirt. The whole interaction felt like a setup from a bad adult movie, and it made me incredibly uncomfortable. She started asking what time I usually wrapped up work each day, whether I ever needed help with administrative tasks or paperwork, and if I ever got lonely working such long hours away from home. The questions were clearly designed to figure out my schedule and find opportunities to spend more time with me. I politely declined the coffee and told her I needed to get back to supervising my crew, but she lingered for another 15 minutes asking detailed questions about the project, how many guys I supervised, and what my daily schedule typically looked like. Finally, she left, but not before saying something that made my skin crawl. "You work so hard, you should let someone take care of you sometime." The implication was crystal clear, and it was completely inappropriate given that I was married to her sister. When I told Jessica about this incident that night, she completely brushed it off like it was no big deal. "Brianna's been driving around a lot lately looking for a new job," she said casually. "She probably really was just passing by and thought it would be nice to bring you coffee." Yeah, right. The girl who's never kept a job longer than 2 months was suddenly so career-focused that she was driving around industrial construction areas looking for employment opportunities. But I didn't want to start a fight with Jessica over her sister's behavior, so I reluctantly let it go and hoped it was just a one-time thing. 2 weeks later, Brianna pulled the exact same stunt, but this time she had escalated her approach significantly. She showed up at my worksite again, but instead of just bringing coffee, she had lunch from some expensive sandwich place downtown. This wasn't just any sandwich either. She had clearly spent serious money on this meal, probably around $20 for a single sandwich, which for someone with absolutely no income represents a pretty substantial investment. Unless, of course, you're expecting some kind of return on that investment. "You know," she said, while unwrapping the sandwich like it was some kind of Christmas present. "Jessica is so lucky to have a man who provides for her like you do. Not all women really appreciate that kind of security in a relationship." When I asked her what exactly she meant by that comment, she just gave me this knowing smile and said, "Oh, nothing. I just think some people don't realize what they have when they have it." But I caught the implication immediately. She was suggesting that Jessica didn't appreciate me enough and that she, Brianna, would be different if she were in Jessica's position. I told her firmly that I was busy with work and didn't have time for lunch, but she kept insisting with this pouty, manipulative attitude. "But I drove all this way just to bring you something nice, and I'm hungry too. We could eat together and just talk for a few minutes." I finally had to be completely blunt and direct with her, telling her that I wasn't interested in having lunch with her, period. End of discussion. She got this weird, almost shocked look on her face, like she genuinely couldn't believe I was rejecting her generous offer and the opportunity to spend time with her. She rolled her eyes dramatically and left in a huff, clearly annoyed that her plan hadn't worked the way she'd expected it to. That night, I told Jessica the whole story, making sure to emphasize how inappropriate and persistent Brianna had been throughout the interaction. Jessica's response completely floored me and showed just how much she was willing to excuse her sister's behavior. "She's probably just trying to butter you up so you'll convince me to let her come on our vacation this summer," Jessica said casually, like this was a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything. Apparently, Brianna had been begging Jessica for weeks to let her tag along on our planned trip to Yellowstone National Park. Jessica had firmly said no because we wanted the vacation to be just the two of us, and also because the idea of spending a week camping in a tent with Brianna sounded like actual hell on earth. "She doesn't have any money for her own vacation," Jessica explained, like this justified her sister's increasingly inappropriate behavior toward me. "She's probably hoping that if she's sweet to you, you'll feel bad for her situation and say she can come with us." I gave Jessica a serious, direct look and told her that wasn't what this was about at all. "She's flirting with me, Jessica, and it's getting worse every time I see her. This isn't about vacation plans." But Jessica just laughed it off like I was being ridiculous and overthinking the situation. "Trust me, Brianna has her sights set way higher than an electrical supervisor," she said with a dismissive tone. "She's looking for doctors and lawyers, remember? You're not rich enough for her standards." That comment stung more than I wanted to admit, but I decided to let it slide rather than start an argument. Jessica was probably right about one thing. Brianna was always talking about finding a millionaire husband and living this luxurious lifestyle. But my gut was telling me something else entirely was going on here, and that Jessica was being naive about her sister's true intentions. 2 months ago, Jessica had to travel to Atlanta for a week-long marketing conference that she attends every year for continuing education credits. I was actually looking forward to having a week of peace and quiet to myself. I could order some pizza, catch up on Netflix shows I'd been meaning to watch, and maybe work on some small projects around the apartment that I'd been putting off. On Thursday night around 9:15 p.m., I was relaxing on the couch in my gym shorts and a comfortable t-shirt. just unwinding after a long day of supervising wire installations at the job site. When the doorbell rang, I figured it was probably a delivery driver with something I'd forgotten I ordered. Or maybe our upstairs neighbor who sometimes locks himself out of his apartment and needs to use our phone. I made what turned out to be a catastrophic mistake. I opened the door without checking the peephole first. Brianna was standing there wearing this tight black dress that barely covered her ass, full makeup like she was heading out to some upscale nightclub, and wearing this huge fake smile that immediately put me on edge. She was holding a large bag of takeout from some expensive Italian restaurant downtown that I recognized as being pretty pricey. "Surprise!" she said with fake enthusiasm, pushing past me into my apartment before I could even react or process what was happening. "I brought dinner. I figured you must be starving, eating bachelor food all week while Jessica's away." I was completely caught off guard by her sudden appearance and aggressive entry into my home. "Brianna, what the hell are you doing here?" "Jessica's at her conference," I said, trying to process what was happening and why she was in my apartment uninvited. "I know, silly," she said with this fake cheerful tone, already unpacking food containers on my kitchen counter like she owned the place and had every right to be there. "That's exactly why I'm here. I felt bad thinking about you all alone in here, eating ramen noodles or whatever guys eat when their wives aren't around to cook for them." She had brought enough food for what seemed like 6 people. Chicken parmigiana, fettuccine alfredo, garlic bread, and some fancy Caesar salad. This spread probably cost around $95, which for someone with absolutely no income whatsoever represents a major financial expense. Unless, of course, you're expecting some kind of significant return on that investment. "Look, this is really inappropriate," I said firmly, trying to establish boundaries immediately. "Jessica's not here, and you shouldn't be either. I think you should take this food and leave right now." But Brianna completely ignored me and continued setting up the food on my coffee table like we had planned this dinner together. "Oh, come on, don't be such a prude," she said dismissively. "I'm just being nice to family. We're family, right?" She sat down on my couch and patted the cushion next to her in an obviously flirtatious gesture. "Come eat with me, I got your favorite. Jessica told me you absolutely love Italian food." The fact that she had specifically asked Jessica about my food preferences was creepy enough, but I remained standing and refused to sit down. "I'm not hungry, and you need to take this food and go home immediately." That's when her fake sweet mask started slipping, and I got a glimpse of who she really was underneath all the manipulation. She gave me this look like she couldn't believe I was rejecting her generous offer and refusing to play along with whatever game she was trying to run. "Seriously, I spent my own money on this expensive dinner, and you won't even sit down and eat with me for a few minutes?" "I didn't ask you to buy dinner," I said firmly. "I don't want you here." She stood up and moved closer to me, close enough that I could smell her overpowering perfume that was probably applied way too heavily for this kind of interaction. "You know what your problem is? You're way too loyal to my sister," she said with this condescending tone. "She doesn't appreciate what she has in you." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea where this conversation was heading. "Jessica takes you for granted," Brianna said, reaching out to touch my arm in an obviously inappropriate gesture. "She's always working, always focused on her career and her stupid conferences. When's the last time she made you feel really special? When's the last time she actually took care of you the way a wife should take care of her husband?" I stepped back from her touch immediately. "My marriage is none of your business whatsoever. I'm just saying," she continued, moving closer to me again despite my obvious discomfort. "Some women know how to treat a man properly. Some women understand that a hardworking guy like you deserves way more attention and appreciation than you're getting at home." The implication was crystal clear, and I'd had enough of this inappropriate conversation. I pointed directly toward the door. "Get out, right now." Instead of leaving like any reasonable person would do, she actually moved even closer and put her hand directly on my chest in an unmistakably sexual gesture. "Why are you fighting this? I see how you look at me during family dinners. I know you've thought about it, about what it would be like." "I've never looked at you anyway except annoyed," I said, grabbing her wrist and yanking her hand off my chest. "Get your hands off me." "Come on," she whispered, pressing herself against me in a way that made my skin crawl. "Jessica's 1,000 miles away. Nobody has to know what happens here tonight. I can give you things she can't, things she won't." That's when I completely lost my temper and any patience I might have had left. "Are you out of your fucking mind? Get the hell out of my house right now." She actually started laughing like this was all some big joke and I was being ridiculous for rejecting her advances. "Relax, I'm just having some fun with you. God, you're so uptight about everything." But then her expression changed completely. and she got this predatory look in her eyes that made my stomach turn with disgust. Although we are all alone here, and I did spend a lot of my own money on this expensive dinner. Don't you think you owe me something for that? I marched directly to the front door and threw it open as hard as I could. Get out! Get the fuck out of my apartment right now! As she was gathering up her purse and the stupid takeout containers, she turned back to me with this smug smile that I'll never forget. You know where to find me when you get tired of playing house with my boring sister. I'll be waiting for you. I slammed the door so hard that the entire frame shook, and immediately tried calling Jessica to tell her what had just happened. It was past 11 p.m. in Atlanta, so she didn't answer her phone. I left a voicemail asking her to call me back as soon as possible, but I didn't want to explain the entire horrific situation in a voice message. I spent the entire night trying to reach Jessica, kicking myself for not recording the conversation with Brianna on my phone. The more I thought about what had just happened, the more I realized how perfectly Brianna had orchestrated the entire situation. She had deliberately waited until Jessica was out of town for a week. She had shown up at night when it would be just the two of us alone. She had brought expensive food to make it look like I had invited her over for a romantic dinner. If I hadn't rejected her advances and thrown her out, she probably would have tried to seduce me and then used it as blackmail material for the rest of my life. I finally got through to Jessica the next morning, but before I could even start explaining what had happened the night before, she was absolutely hysterical and screaming at me through the phone. "How could you do this to my sister? She's completely devastated," she yelled. "She was just trying to be nice to you while I was away." My blood went cold as I realized what was happening. "Jessica, what are you talking about? What did she tell you?" It turns out that Brianna had called Jessica just about an hour after leaving my apartment, spinning a completely fabricated story that painted me as the aggressor and herself as the innocent victim. According to Brianna's version of events, she had brought me dinner as a friendly, sisterly gesture because she felt bad that I was alone all week while Jessica was at her conference. But when she arrived at the apartment, I had answered the door acting strange and had invited her inside. Brianna claimed that I had been complaining about Jessica being gone all the time for work and how lonely and neglected I felt in our marriage. She said I kept trying to get her to sit closer to me on the couch and that I was making inappropriate comments about how attractive she looked in her dress. Then, supposedly, I had grabbed her hand and tried to pull her toward the bedroom, saying something like, "Jessica doesn't have to know what happens here." According to this completely fictional story, Brianna had to physically fight me off and threaten to scream if I didn't let her go, before I finally backed down and let her leave. She told Jessica that she was traumatized and scared by the whole experience, and that she had never felt so uncomfortable and violated in her entire life. The whole story was complete and utter fiction from beginning to end. But Brianna had sold it with an Academy Award-worthy performance, complete with tears and dramatic details about how shocked and betrayed she felt that I would do something like this to Jessica. "She's my sister!" Jessica screamed through the phone with genuine anguish in her voice. "How could you try to fuck my own sister while I'm away? How could you betray me like this?" I tried to stay calm and explain what had really happened, giving Jessica my side of the story step by step. But Jessica wasn't having any of it and wouldn't let me get through more than a few sentences before cutting me off. Every time I tried to tell the truth about the situation, she would interrupt me with things like, "Brianna would never lie about something like this," or "Why would she make up such a horrible story about you?" "Jessica, think about this logically for just 1 second," I pleaded with her. "Why would I suddenly make a move on Brianna after years of barely being able to tolerate her presence? You know exactly how I feel about her. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever." Her response absolutely destroyed me and showed me just how little faith she had in our marriage. "I don't know, maybe you've been thinking about it for a while and finally decided to act on it. She is prettier than me, and she doesn't work 60 hours a week like I do. Maybe you've been resenting me for not being around enough?" I was completely speechless. My wife of 4 years, someone I had never given any reason to doubt my faithfulness, actually believed that I was capable of cheating on her with her unemployed, gold-digging sister, who I had never shown the slightest romantic interest in throughout our entire relationship. "You really think I'm capable of something like that?" I asked, my voice probably showing how hurt and shocked I was by her accusation. "I don't know what to think anymore," she said with this cold, distant tone I had never heard from her before. Brianna was sobbing when she called me. She said you were like a completely different person, someone she didn't recognize. When Jessica finally returned from Atlanta 3 days later, she went straight to her parents' house instead of coming home to our apartment. She wouldn't answer my phone calls and would only respond to my text messages with brief, cold responses like, "I need time to process this and I can't look at you right now." The few times I did manage to get her on the phone over the next 2 weeks, she was ice cold and distant with me. Brianna had apparently told their parents about her fabricated version of events too. So now Jessica's entire family was treating me like I was some kind of sexual predator. Jessica kept saying things like, "My whole family is disgusted with you," and "My dad wants to come over and beat the shit out of you for what you did to Brianna." I reminded Jessica of all the times over the past few months when I had told her about Brianna's inappropriate behavior toward me. The constant social media stalking, the surprise visits to my work site, the obvious flirting during family dinners, and all the red flags that had been building up for months. But Jessica dismissed everything I said as irrelevant. "That's just how Brianna is," she said defensively. "She's friendly with everyone because she doesn't have many close friends. You're the one who misinterpreted her friendliness as something sexual." "So you think I've been lying about her behavior for months?" I asked, unable to believe what I was hearing. "I think you convinced yourself that she was interested in you romantically," Jessica replied with this accusatory tone. "And then when you finally made a move on her, she rejected you. So now you're trying to make her look like the bad guy to cover up what you did." That's when I knew there was absolutely no coming back from this situation. Jessica didn't just believe Brianna's lies. She had constructed an entire narrative in her head, where I was some kind of predator who had been fantasizing about her sister for months and had finally acted on those fantasies when the opportunity presented itself. After 3 weeks of this nightmare situation, I decided to make one final attempt at reasoning with Jessica and trying to save our marriage. I drove over to her parents' house to try to have a face-to-face conversation without Brianna being there, to poison the well with her presence and continued manipulation. This turned out to be a huge mistake that only made everything worse. The moment Jessica's dad opened the front door, he started screaming at me about how I wasn't welcome on their property and how I should be ashamed of myself for what I had done to their daughter. Jessica's mom was standing behind him with her arms crossed, giving me looks like I was carrying some kind of contagious disease that might infect their entire family. "You've got some nerve showing up here," her dad said with genuine anger in his voice, "after what you did to Brianna. How dare you come to our house?" "I didn't do anything to Brianna," I said, as firmly and clearly as I could. "She lied to all of you about what really happened that night." Jessica appeared at the door at that moment, looking at me like I was a complete stranger rather than someone she had been married to for 4 years. "What do you want?" she asked with this cold, hostile tone. "I want to talk to my wife without her family acting like I'm some kind of criminal," I replied, trying to appeal to whatever was left of our relationship. "I have nothing to say to you," she said flatly, without even a hint of the warmth or affection that had once existed between us. I looked her straight in the eye and asked her directly, "Do you trust me at all? After 6 years together, do you honestly believe I'm capable of what Brianna accused me of?" Jessica stared at me for a long, painful moment, and then said something that completely shattered whatever hope I had left for our marriage. "I don't know who you are anymore." That was it. That was the moment I knew everything was truly over between us. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Fine. If you want to believe your lying, manipulative sister over your own husband, then you can have her. I'm done with all of you." I walked away from that house knowing with absolute certainty that my marriage was over, and that there was no point in trying to fight for someone who had so little faith in me and our relationship. The following week, I contacted a divorce lawyer and filed papers citing irreconcilable differences. When Jessica got served with the divorce papers, she sent me a long, angry text message about how I was running away from the situation instead of taking responsibility for my actions, and how she never thought I was capable of something like this. I didn't respond to her message. From that point forward, my lawyer handled all communication, and I refused to engage with Jessica or her family directly. But here's where the story takes a completely unexpected turn that I never could have seen coming. While the divorce proceedings were being finalized, something incredible happened at my work. The construction company I work for got bought out by a massive national firm as part of a major industry consolidation. As part of the acquisition deal, all senior staff members received retention bonuses based on our project portfolios, years of service, and value to the new company. My retention bonus turned out to be $215,000 after taxes. Combined with my existing savings and the equity I had built up over the years, I suddenly found myself with almost $280,000 in liquid assets. It wasn't millionaire money by any stretch, but it was definitely enough to completely change my lifestyle and give me financial security I had never experienced before. I didn't tell anyone about this financial windfall except for my lawyer and my accountant. I quietly bought a small but nice house in a good neighborhood, paying cash so I wouldn't have any mortgage payments. I upgraded to a brand new F-250, also paying cash so I could avoid monthly truck payments. I also started looking into some investment opportunities to make my money work for me long term. The divorce moved quickly since we didn't have any children together, and I didn't fight Jessica on splitting our previous marital assets 50-50. She got half of our old joint savings account and kept the Colorado, while I kept my tools and work equipment. What Jessica had no idea about was the retention bonus, since it happened after we had officially separated and filed for divorce. During the divorce proceedings, I heard through mutual friends that Jessica's family had completely rallied around Brianna, like she was some kind of hero who had saved Jessica from a cheating, predatory husband. Brianna was apparently milking all the attention and sympathy for everything it was worth, posting vague messages on social media about protecting the people you love and standing up to toxic men who try to take advantage of vulnerable women. Meanwhile, Jessica was struggling financially and emotionally. Her marketing firm had gone through a round of layoffs, and while she managed to keep her job, she had lost her seniority and taken a significant pay cut. She was living in a tiny studio apartment across town that was all she could afford on her reduced income, and she was driving the Colorado with 190,000 miles on it because she couldn't afford to buy anything better or more reliable. But Brianna? Brianna was still living with her parents rent-free, still completely unemployed, still posting thirst trap photos on Instagram, and still endlessly swiping through dating apps looking for her meal ticket to financial security. About 10 months after the divorce was finalized and I had started rebuilding my life, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I decided to answer it instead of letting it go to voicemail. It turned out to be Jessica, and she was crying hysterically on the other end of the line. "Please don't hang up," she said through her tears, her voice shaking with emotion. "I know I don't deserve to talk to you after everything that happened, but I need to tell you something important." I stayed on the line, curious about what could possibly make her call me after almost a year of absolutely no contact between us. "I found out the truth about Brianna," she said, sobbing even harder, "about what really happened that night when she came to your apartment. It turns out that Brianna had finally found her sugar daddy, a 48-year-old divorced real estate investor named Gary, who owned several rental properties around the Tampa area. Gary wasn't exactly the billionaire Prince Charming that Brianna had been dreaming about for years, but he had decent money and was apparently stupid enough to fall for her manipulative act and fake persona. Brianna had immediately moved in with Gary and started posting constantly on social media about her amazing new boyfriend and their supposedly luxurious lifestyle together. The problem was that Gary's idea of luxury was a 4-bedroom house in a middle-class suburb and dinner dates at chain restaurants like Olive Garden and Red Lobster. It wasn't exactly the millionaire lifestyle that Brianna had been promising herself and posting about for years. But here's where things get really interesting and where Brianna's true character finally came to light. Once Brianna had locked down Gary as her financial provider, she completely turned on her own family with a viciousness that shocked everyone. She told their parents that they were embarrassing and beneath her social status now, and that she couldn't afford to be associated with poor people anymore because it would damage her reputation and image. She stopped coming to family events entirely and blocked Jessica on all social media platforms so she wouldn't be associated with her unsuccessful sister. When their dad had chest pains and had to be rushed to the emergency room, thankfully it turned out to be just anxiety and not a heart attack, Brianna refused to come to the hospital because she claimed she was too busy with Gary to deal with family drama. Jessica called her, crying and begging her to at least call their dad or send a text message to show she cared. And Brianna coldly told her, "I can't be bothered with your family drama anymore. I have my own life to worry about now." That's when Jessica started seeing glimpses of Brianna's true colors and realizing what kind of person her sister really was. But the real revelation that changed everything came a few weeks later. Jessica was sitting in a coffee shop near her apartment, just trying to enjoy a quiet moment and maybe get some work done, when she overheard a conversation at the table next to her. She recognized Brianna's distinctive voice and looked over to see her sister talking to one of her equally trashy friends, bragging loudly about her manipulation tactics. "I totally played the victim card perfectly," Brianna was saying with this laugh that Jessica described as genuinely evil. "I told Jessica that her loser husband tried to assault me, and she ate it up completely without question. I mean, who was she going to believe? Her loving, innocent sister or some blue-collar electrical worker?" Jessica sat there in complete shock as Brianna continued describing in detail how she had deliberately targeted me because she was jealous of Jessica's stable relationship and comfortable middle-class life. She admitted that she had been actively trying to seduce me for months, And when I rejected her advances and threw her out of my apartment, she decided to destroy my marriage out of pure spite and revenge. The best part, Brianna said with this cruel satisfaction in her voice, is that now Jessica's broke and miserable, living in some shitty studio apartment and struggling to pay her bills. And I'm living with a guy who spoils me and pays for everything I want. She totally deserved it for always acting like she was better than me, just because she had a job and a husband. Jessica managed to record the rest of this conversation on her phone before Brianna noticed her sitting there and angrily stormed out of the coffee shop. I am so sorry, Jessica sobbed through the phone as she told me this story. I should have believed you from the beginning. I should have trusted my own husband over her lies. I've completely ruined everything between us, and it's all my fault. I listened to the audio recording she sent me of Brianna's confession. Hearing Brianna laugh about destroying my marriage was absolutely infuriating, but it was also incredibly vindicating to finally have concrete proof of what I had known all along. "What do you want from me, Jessica?" I asked when she finished apologizing and explaining everything. "I know this is probably impossible after everything I put you through," she said, with hope creeping into her voice. "But I was hoping maybe we could try to work things out. I know I don't deserve it, but I love you and I miss you terribly. I realize now that I made the biggest mistake of my life by not believing you." I let her talk for a few more minutes about how sorry she was and how she wanted to rebuild our relationship and earn back my trust. Then I delivered the news that she clearly wasn't expecting. "Jessica, I appreciate the apology, and I'm glad you finally know the truth, but that ship has sailed a long time ago. I'm not interested in getting back together." She started crying even harder. "Please just think about it. We were good together. We could be good again if you just give me another chance." "No, we can't," I said firmly. "You chose her over me. You believe the absolute worst possible thing about me with zero evidence and no consideration for the kind of person you knew me to be. That's not something I can just forgive and forget. But I know the truth now," she pleaded. "I'll make it up to you, I promise. I'll do whatever it takes." That's when I decided to twist the knife a little bit and let her know exactly what she had given up. "You want to know the funny part, Jessica? I'm doing better now than I ever was when we were married. The divorce was honestly the best thing that ever happened to me." "What do you mean?" she asked, clearly confused by my confidence. I told her about the retention bonus, the new house I had paid for in cash, and the financial security and independence I now enjoyed. I could hear her sharp intake of breath as she realized the magnitude of what she had thrown away by believing Brianna's lies. You're rich now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper as the reality of the situation sank in. "I'm comfortable," I replied calmly. "More comfortable than I ever would have been supporting you and helping out your toxic family for the rest of my life." There was a long, painful silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head as she processed what this meant for her future and what opportunities she had just lost forever. "I know you probably hate me," she finally said, her voice small and defeated. "But I'm in a really bad place financially right now. I lost my health benefits when they restructured my department at work, and my rent went up significantly this year. I can barely afford groceries most weeks, and I don't know what I'm going to do." Then came the request I should have seen coming from a mile away. "I was wondering if maybe you could help me out, just until I get back on my feet financially. I don't have anyone else I can turn to." I almost burst out laughing at the sheer audacity of what she was asking. "How much money do you need?" I asked, genuinely curious to see just how far she would go with this request. "Maybe $3,500, she said hopefully. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I really don't have anyone else. My parents are stretched thin with Dad's medical bills from his heart scare, and Brianna won't even talk to me anymore, let alone help me financially." "Jessica," I said with amusement in my voice, "I probably spend $3,500 a month just on truck payments and house maintenance costs. That's not even real money to me anymore." Her voice immediately got hopeful and excited. "So you'll help me then?" "Absolutely not," I said without hesitation. The silence stretched on for almost a full minute as she processed my rejection. "But why?" she finally asked, her voice turning angry and indignant. "If it's not that much money to you, why won't you help me?" "Because you chose Brianna over me," I explained calmly. "You destroyed our marriage based on her lies and manipulation. Now you can live with the consequences of that choice for the rest of your life." "That's not fair," she said, her voice getting more defensive and hostile. "I made a mistake, but I'm trying to make it right now that I know the truth." "No," I corrected her. "You're trying to get money from me because your life sucks now and you're desperate. There's a big difference between actually making things right and just wanting financial help." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked her number. But the story doesn't end there, because apparently word travels fast in desperate families. About 2 weeks later, I got another call from an unknown number. This time it was Brianna herself, and I have to admit I was curious enough about what she could possibly want to actually answer the call. It turns out that Gary had caught Brianna cheating on him with some 26-year-old personal trainer from her gym, and he had immediately kicked her out of his house. She was back to living with her parents, but now their dad's medical bills had completely drained their savings, and the family was struggling to keep up with their mortgage payments. "I know we've had our differences in the past," Brianna said in this fake sweet voice that made my skin crawl just like it always had, "but I'm hoping we can put all of that behind us now. Jessica told me about your recent success, and I was wondering if maybe you'd be willing to help out the family during this really difficult time." The sheer audacity of this woman calling me for money after she had deliberately destroyed my marriage was absolutely unbelievable. I was almost impressed by how shameless she was being. "Help out how exactly?" I asked, curious to see how far down this rabbit hole she was willing to go. "Well, Mom and Dad are behind on their mortgage payments, and there are still medical bills from Dad's emergency room visit," she explained. "And I'm actively looking for work, but it's really hard to find something that pays enough to make a real difference." She rattled off this sob story that probably added up to about $6,000 a month in total expenses that needed to be covered. "That's a lot of money, Brianna," I said, playing along with her game. "I know it is, but you're doing so well financially now, and we're still family in a way, right?" she said hopefully. "And I was thinking maybe we could work out some kind of mutually beneficial arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea where this was heading. Her voice got lower and more sultry as she delivered her proposition. "Well, you're single now, and I'm single again too. Maybe we could help each other out in more ways than one. I could show you just how grateful I am for your generosity." This woman was literally offering to prostitute herself to me for money, after she had destroyed my marriage with her lies. The level of shamelessness was actually impressive in its own disgusting way. "That's an interesting offer, Brianna," I said, pretending to consider it. "I knew you'd understand," she said with confidence in her voice. "You always seemed like a smart man who knows a good deal when he sees one." "Here's my counter-offer," I said, letting her think she had me hooked. "I want you to call Jessica right now and put her on speakerphone. Then I want you to admit that you lied about everything that happened that night at my apartment. Tell her exactly what you did and why you did it. Admit that you tried to seduce me, and when I rejected you, you made up that whole story to destroy my marriage out of spite." There was a long pause as she realized I wasn't going to be as easy to manipulate as she had hoped. "I can't do that," she said quietly. "Then we have nothing to discuss," I replied. Wait, she said quickly, panic creeping into her voice. "Maybe we don't need to involve Jessica in this. Maybe this can just be between the two of us. How much money are we talking about here exactly?" "I could be very, very grateful," she continued. "The kind of grateful that would make it worth your while, if you know what I mean." I let her dig herself deeper for a few more minutes, listening to her describe in increasingly graphic detail what she was willing to do for financial support. Then I dropped the hammer on her. "Brianna, I wouldn't give you a single penny if you were the last woman on earth," I said, with all the contempt I could muster. "You're a lying, manipulative whore who destroyed my marriage for no reason other than spite. And now you want to prostitute yourself to me for money? Do you have any idea how absolutely pathetic that is?" "But I need help," she whined pathetically. "I don't have anywhere else to go or anyone else to turn to." "You should have thought about that before you decided to play games with people's lives," I told her coldly. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before falsely accusing someone of sexual assault just because they rejected your advances." "That's not what I did," she protested weakly. "That's exactly what you did, and we both know it," I shot back. "I hope you and your entire family lose everything you have. And I hope you end up exactly where you deserve to be, living in some shitty trailer park, giving handjobs for grocery money." I hung up on her and immediately blocked that number as well. But apparently Brianna wasn't done trying to get money out of me. Over the next few weeks, she tried calling me from different phone numbers, including having friends and other family members reach out to me on her behalf. She even showed up at my work site one more time, but this time, I was ready for her. I had already informed security about the situation, and they immediately escorted her off the property. They told her in no uncertain terms that she would be arrested for trespassing if she ever showed up there again. That finally seemed to get the message across that I was serious about having no contact with her whatsoever. The last update I heard about Brianna came through some mutual friends who still kept in touch with Jessica's family. Apparently, she had started working at some strip club downtown, trying to make enough money to help her parents keep their house and avoid foreclosure. The golden child who had always been too good for regular employment was finally learning what real work felt like, even if it was taking her clothes off for strangers. Jessica never contacted me again after I refused to help her financially. The last information I got about her situation came from those same mutual friends, and it wasn't good news for her either. She had been forced to move back in with her parents because she couldn't afford to keep paying rent on her studio apartment. She was working 2 part-time jobs just to make ends meet and help her family with their mounting expenses. Meanwhile, I'm living my absolute best life in my beautiful paid-off house with my paid-off truck and a steadily growing investment portfolio. Sometimes when I'm feeling particularly petty, I drive past their old neighborhood just to remind myself of how much better off I am without that entire toxic family in my life. It's a satisfying reminder of how things worked out in the end. The moral of this entire story is pretty simple. Never stick your dick in crazy and never trust a gold digger no matter how much your wife insists she's just being friendly. When someone shows you who they really are through their actions, believe them the first time. Don't make excuses for toxic behavior, and don't let family loyalty blind you to obvious red flags. I learned the hard way that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most willing to destroy your life for their own selfish purposes. But I also learned that karma has a funny way of working itself out in the end. The people who tried to ruin me ended up ruining themselves, while I came out stronger, wealthier, and happier than I ever was before. If you're dealing with toxic family members or manipulative people in your own life, take my advice. Cut them off completely and don't look back. Your peace of mind and happiness are worth more than any relationship with people who don't have your best interests at heart. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and letting them watch from the sidelines as you succeed without them. TLDR. My sister-in-law tried to seduce me, then falsely accused me of assault when I rejected her, destroying my marriage. Years later, after I became financially successful, both she and my ex-wife came crawling back asking for money. I told them both to go to hell, and now they're struggling while I'm thriving.